What's going on, knuckleheads? This is George with Fighters Rep. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about all things boxing. Of course, we can at any time shift gears if somebody asks some questions about some other combat sports, but we're going to be talking about boxing. Specifically, we're going to be touching on Patrick Day, Alexander Usyk, and his place in the heavyweight division now after he's completed his first fight. The boxing establishment, which is what we're fighting against and what needs to be fought against in the present day and age with regards to boxing and journalism, especially as it relates to boxing. Patrick Day, Usyk, and all this stuff is going to come up, and we've got plenty of time to talk about it. So thanks for joining, knuckleheads. Be sure to click subscribe below if you like talking about combat sports. So as we know, on the undercard of the Alexander Usyk fight versus Chaz Witherspoon, Patrick Day suffered a vicious knockout. He was knocked down twice in the lead up to the final knockout, which was in the 10th round. He was knocked down twice in a fight with an undefeated Charles Conwell. And, knocked down twice, knocked out in the 10th round. Unfortunately, he has not come to yet. And this is where the journalism part gets tied into the story. There are literally accounts on Twitter that look to have erroneously called this man's passing already. What we do know is he suffered what looks to be a traumatic brain injury during that fight. He was stretchered out after the 10th round due to that knockout. And then he apparently had a seizure on the way to the hospital. Now it looks like he's in a coma. That's the last thing I heard, was that he's in a coma and in critical condition. However, there are literally, knuckleheads, boxing sites right now, on Twitter at the very least, that are reporting him as dead, and there's really nothing that I can find from a legitimate source to corroborate his death. So that's part of the reason I included journalism in this topic, because, ladies and gentlemen, journalism is not something you need a license for. It's not something you have to pass a test in order to become. Journalism is an activity, and anybody can do it. And even in certain professions where licenses are required, you get this kind of craziness. But my goodness, we've got journalists that are literally killing off Patrick Day, and it's just absolutely disturbing at a time like this when people should be putting out positive vibes and should only be reporting anything related to Patrick Day in a positive light, and at the very least, they should be making sure that what they report about Patrick Day is accurate. Very important to be accurate. Otherwise, we lose credibility. So that's a problem I'm having there. 27 years old. This is a tragic situation. I believe he was an Olympic alternate at some point, or fought to become an Olympic alternate. Had a very solid career. Has some decent experience. He fought a guy in Charles Conwell who was an Olympian, U.S. Olympian in 2016, undefeated. And Patrick Day, seemingly he wasn't in over his head. I mean, he did have more fights, although he had come off of a loss. And, but I wouldn't say that he was in over his head in this one against Charles Connell. I do think, or Charles Conwell, I do think that it was just an unfortunate accident. I do think that he just took some horrible shots, especially at the end of the fight, the final knockdown. He was basically hit very hard behind the ear and then suffered a knockout to the jaw. He then, kind of whiplashed back and hit the back of his head on the canvas. It was really vicious and brutal to watch. And a lot of people are actually coming out of the woodwork calling for a ban. They're calling for a ban to boxing. I think that that's a little much because they're basically analogizing boxing to human cockfighting, human dogfighting, things like that. Obviously, I think that's a poor analogy. Why? Because, when there's cockfighting, when there's dogfighting, things of that sort, those animals that they're putting in there to fight each other to the death, okay? It's not a sport, it's a fight to the death in those situations. And they're being basically forced to fight each other to the death. Boxing is the sweet science. It's an art. Can it be brutal? Absolutely. But the participants are voluntarily participating. And they've chosen a certain lifestyle. And I think the most unfortunate part is the fact that besides the fighters being basically in danger of getting hurt, risking death in the ring, I think the worst part for me is the way boxing culture and the boxing establishment continues to treat these fighters, and the way it treats guys who have a loss on their record, and basically the stigma that's associated with losses. It's one of the things that I fight all the time, and it disgusts me every time I think about it. And it's the fact that, guys who have lost or guys that do lose, basically, and especially in the sport of boxing, can really, miss out on future paydays, on future opportunities, and can basically be shunned by the boxing community, by the sport. Can be absolutely shunned if they have a loss on their record. And is that the way? See, the problem I have with that is that the way that the public, the viewing public, should accept for boxing culture to be treating these fighters? Now, we take a look at a situation like we had with Patrick Day, where the man was in there, got knocked down twice before the 10th round, where he got knocked out and is now fighting for his life at a hospital. Should a man like that, like Patrick Day, be treated in that fashion? Should money and food be taken off his family's table in this profession, this brutal profession that he chose, because a loss doesn't look good, or, playing this boxing culture of undefeated, superstars, because he's not deserving to be a part of that. The point is, when guys step in the ring, they're risking everything. They're risking their lives, as we've seen with Patrick Day. And as we've seen with 3 fighters now before Patrick Day, and hopefully it doesn't have to happen to Patrick Day, but as we've seen with 3 fighters just this year, 3 boxers who've lost their lives in the ring, should these fighters be treated the way they're being treated by the boxing culture? This boxing establishment is absolutely disturbing, as opposed to, respecting all fighters, win or lose, respecting them and honoring them for their courage to step up in the ring, trying to build a culture around that, and having a culture like that would just help everybody. It would help the promoters, it would help the fighters, it would help the fans to sort of continue to honor and give opportunities to fighters, whether they win or lose, and to respect them and honor them whether they win or lose, and to prevent them from being matched in fights where they have no chance, to prevent them from being in fights where they have no chance. I mean, this would benefit everybody. And, the boxing establishment is really, really starting to reek, especially after what happened this weekend with Usyk, who, even though he beat Chaz Witherspoon, beat a guy who he was really supposed to beat. I mean, Usyk was a minus 5,000 favorite in that fight. Basically what that means is you had to put $5,000 down at the sports book to win $100 if Usyk won. Dimitri Bivol, who was fighting Lenin, I believe it was Lenin Castillo, was his opponent, Dimitri Bivol's. I'm gonna get his name now, but Lenin Castillo. His opponent, Lenin Castillo, was a 22-1 underdog. A 22-1 underdog. What is he doing in the ring with Dimitri Bivol, and was his life being risked in there? It's just not. What does putting Dimitri Bivol in the ring with a Lenin Castillo do for anybody? It's just extremely disturbing. This doesn't advance Dimitri Bivol's career at all. All it does is get him some airtime on DAZN. It definitely doesn't. It definitely doesn't help Lenin Castillo's life at all. I mean, maybe he gets a little bit of a payday. I'd love to know what he's making for fights like these. It's just, regardless of pay or not, I mean, there's always someone that's willing to fight, and there's always someone on your level that's willing to fight. Why do they insist on making these ridiculous fights in order to build these ridiculously fake padded records for these guys in a desperate attempt to make them into stars? I think you can make people stars without forcing upon them an undefeated record and without feeding all these people to them that have no chance to beat them, and basically ruining their opportunities. All that fodder. Let's call it, let's call it what it is. Those guys are tomato cans. So, what happens to those tomato cans? There's a tomato can once in a while that wants to be a tomato can. There really is. But most guys don't want to be a tomato can. Most guys want to get in there and give it their all. But what chance do they have? What chance do they have? Again, if we look at Chaz Witherspoon, what chance did he have against Alexander Usyk? An Olympic gold medalist and a guy with I don't know how many gold medals throughout his career, at least 3, and a guy with 350 amateur fights. What chance at all did Chaz Witherspoon have? It's just ridiculous. Lenin Castillo. We're gonna take a look at Lenin Castillo real quick, okay? So Lenin Castillo is 20-3-1. Before the Bivol fight, you couldn't name a guy that Lenin Castillo had fought that you'd heard of before the Bivol fight. You couldn't name him. Bivol, on the other hand, had actually, fought some decent guys. Sullivan Barrera, Isaac Chilemba, John Pascal, Joe Smith Jr. I mean, these are guys that we've heard of. These are guys that can fight. Sullivan Barrera, I mean, he gave Andre Ward a decent fight. Isaac Chilemba had given Tony Bellew a decent fight. Jean Pascal, we all know him. As a matter of fact, Jean Pascal won the WBC silver light heavyweight title and the interim world WBA light heavyweight title against Marcus Brown just a couple months ago in August. So, Dimitri Bivol was a guy who at just 17 fights had fought a good bit of talent already and has an incredible amateur background. Just an incredible amateur pedigree. So I mean, what's going on? Why is this happening over and over again in boxing? And people want to down MMA and they want to talk about UFC and trash Dana White. This doesn't happen that much under Dana White's watch. The UFC over and over again is giving us the best fighting the best. Okay, once in a while they'll have a gimmicky fight. They'll have maybe a guy that's not deserving. But for the most part, all those fights are pretty evenly matched, and you gotta appreciate that. And that's what's made the sport so great. And that's what's made MMA a combat sport where if you've got a loss or if you've got a few losses, people just brush it off. But in boxing, that's not the way it is. In boxing, if you have a loss, you're dead. You're dead unless your name is Canelo. Canelo had that one loss against Floyd Mayweather, and my goodness, he's lucky he was young and wasn't priming yet and was able to overcome that, because that could have been the death knell for a lot of boxers. So real quick, we're going to look at Dimitri Bivol's accomplishments so you guys know what we're talking about here. Dimitri Bivol, as an amateur, you guys ready for this one? 268 wins to 15 losses. A Russian national amateur boxing champion as a light heavyweight. He won the World Combat Games gold medal in St. Petersburg in 2013, and even the Youth World Championships in Guadalajara as a middleweight. He won the bronze. So, I mean, this guy is, talented beyond belief. And it was absolutely accurate from the odds makers to put Lenin Castillo as a 22-1 underdog. Man, ridiculous. Just absolutely ridiculous. Marco Martinez in the chat, what's up, brother? Really appreciate you being in there. Is saying, is day injury something that can be prevented, or is this just a part of the game? That's another thing a lot of people are talking about. A lot of people are saying ban boxing, which is not going to happen, because if you ban boxing, then, you got to ban pretty much any sport where there's physical contact, voluntary physical contact. Football would be next, probably. I'm sure people have died in football. It's just, I don't think it's going to happen. I do think there's some things that can be done to negate it. Some people brought up headgear. Maybe there's a different kind of gloves or material for the gloves that can be designed. Some people were saying bring the rounds down to maybe like 5 rounds instead of 12 rounds. I think the problem with boxing is they're taking sustained punishment to the skull. The issue with boxing too is, besides the fact that it's 12 rounds of sustained punishment to the skull, they don't really have a lot of options as to where they could punch a guy, right? You either punch him in the head or the body. With kickboxing, which, like Fighters Rep, our sport, our rule set, with kickboxing, you kick to the legs, you could kick to the body, you could punch to the head. It's only 3 rounds, and at the professional level, it's only 3 minutes. At amateur level, it's only 2 minutes. So, I mean, there's no way, really, for you to take the same amount of punishment over the course of 3 rounds as you would in a 12-round boxing match. Also, I really believe if somebody's hurt by a shin to the head, for example, I mean, they're probably just going to drop. Whereas people can take more punches. If the only thing you're allowed to take is a punch to the head, which is basically the boxing rules, punches to the head and punches to the body, and most guys don't really go to the body that much. If you're just taking shots to the head over and over again from a fist, you might be able to stay in the fight long enough to really take some horrible damage, especially in to your brain. But in a 3-minute kickboxing fight, it's just, I don't think it's ever going to amount to that same consistent, constant, damage that you're going to take to the head from some knuckles. So as far as, if it can be prevented, what can be done, I think maybe someone can devise some kind of material for the gloves. Maybe somebody can create some kind of headgear that doesn't look stupid, that wouldn't mess with the experience for the fans. I think a lot of things can be done. Maybe cutting down the rounds in a boxing match. But as far as banning boxing, I don't think that's going to happen. I think people need to try to come up with some real solutions as opposed to just going ahead and tossing the entire sport, basically by the wayside because they don't like a certain result. And this is a tragic, horrible result. And we have lost 3 fighters this year, and this, God forbid, nothing happens to Patrick Day, but we have had 3 deaths in boxing this year. And maybe it is time people start looking into something to do that would negate that kind of death, because nobody deserves that after a pretty brutal boxing career. I mean, my understanding from fighters, especially boxers, is that, they go through quite a bit, and to end your career with a death in the ring that's just depressing to even think about. So definitely, we need to start talking about ways to negate that. David Arvelo's in the chat. Dave, welcome, my brother. Appreciate you being on here. David is saying, was he fighting a bunch of taxi drivers from Buenos Aires? I'm imagining that Dave is talking about either Usyk or Bivol. David, as far as Bivol's fight and Usyk's fight, they both might as well have been fighting taxi drivers from Argentina. At the very least, Uber or Lyft drivers. At least those guys, I feel like they would be less dedicated to the transport of human beings and might potentially have some sort of combat sports interest on the side. But yeah, taxi drivers from Buenos Aires is pretty accurate when we talk about who Bivol and Usyk were fighting on Saturday night. Chaz Witherspoon, 38 years old, had lost to anybody he'd stepped up against that was of note, even if they weren't that great. Lost to Seth Mitchell, lost to Tony Thompson, DQ'd against Chris Arreola. But I think he was losing that fight too. Just not a guy who needed to be in there with perhaps the greatest cruiserweight that ever lived, that was moving up to heavyweight. Perhaps the greatest cruiserweight that ever lived. So yeah, and Bivol, the odds speak for themselves. I'm not. Numbers don't lie. I'm not sensationalizing anything. Bivol's opponent, Lenin Castillo, was a 22-1 underdog. There's just no need for a 22-1 underdog. So yeah. Marco Martinez says, it seems as though the Ali Act has a large negative impact on boxing. It helps boxers get paid, but makes a UFC-style structure almost impossible. It makes it harder to have even matchmaking. Maybe that's something we can get into at some point. It's almost weird, right, that preventing that tyranny that is the UFC is actually preventing the best fighters from fighting the best fighters, and perhaps preventing a culture from forming where people are appreciated just for fighting as opposed to just for winning and, having never lost, even though they're fighting nobodies. It's amazing how many people get away with padded, undefeated records. They've fought nobody, and people love them for it. I don't get it. I don't get it, but those are casuals that are loving that kind of thing, and it's a sad situation. David Arvello, pale Hispanics for the win. I'm not sure who you're talking about there, David. Because I shaved my beard. Much appreciated, my man. Marco Martinez, banning boxing is a horrible concept idea. It's contributing to the pussification of society. Can't ban baseball because some player gets beamed in the head. That's true. But, that's the knee-jerk reaction of a lot of people. Something bad happens and, they fall apart and they want the sport banned. Again, it's unfortunate things like this come up and they give us something to think and talk about, and maybe some changes get implemented. Maybe changes need to be implemented. But as far as banning the sport, and equating it to human cockfighting or human dog fighting, it's just ridiculous. I mean, people are doing this voluntarily. There's all kinds of regulations to this. People wear a mouthpiece. People wear a cup. People are wearing gloves. There are rules. There knockdowns. There's the referee in there. I mean, this thing is a rarity, but that knockout was vicious. I actually, if you guys want to go back and watch it, it's on YouTube. I saw it one time. I didn't want to watch it again. That was just horrible. It was horrible to watch. The guy took 2 shots behind the ear, vicious shots, and then took a really nasty shot. And I'm wondering if the canvas, his head smashing into the canvas on the way down, I'm wondering if that had an effect, right? If that made it worse. I don't know. I think that might have made it worse. Maybe there's a way to make the canvases better so that when that does happen, people don't get hurt as badly. But man, he basically took 4 big shots into, losing his consciousness. And it was the 2 punches behind the ear, in the finishing sequence at least, the punch to the jaw that knocked him down and knocked him out, and then the head snapping into the canvas. It was really bad. And he'd been knocked down twice earlier in the fight, so I mean, could the fight have been stopped earlier? Should they have pulled him out? These are things that people need to, also need to think about. Some people are saying his corner should have stopped the fight sooner. I mean, I don't know. When you're knocked down twice at the beginning of the fight, I mean, should there be some sort of forfeit rule that's implemented? But I mean, you can't do that in boxing, right? Because somebody can get beat up the entire fight and land 1 big shot, and then that's it. They win the fight. They turn the whole thing around. So it's just hard. It's a hard thing to kind of judge and to fix. Marco Martinez, they cut the rounds from 15 to 12 for this reason. That's true. That's true. That's the 15 round fight. That's the one where Boom Boom Mancini killed a guy, killed the Korean guy. I think his name was Doohoo Kim or something like that. That was a horrible situation as well. And boxing stopped being 15 rounds because of situations like that. So maybe they cut it back more, but does that start to erode at the sport? I mean, if they cut it down to 5 or 10 rounds, I mean, definitely something to think about. This guy, Patrick Day, was knocked out in the 10th round and killed in the 10th round. I mean, so would they have to cut it down to 9 with that in mind, or do they, knock it down to 5? Maybe that would force guys to fight more and be more aggressive. So maybe it would have a negative effect on the whole thing. You never know. David Arvello is saying headgear in MMA is an abomination. Headgear in boxing and kickboxing is a small step or two removed from being an abomination, especially if you don't have a ref on top of the action. People will get hurt. I do think the headgear thing takes away from the experience for the fighters and for the fans. But, in certain situations, like with the IKF, which is the sanctioning body I work with Fighters Rep Promotions, if you don't have at least 3 fights, they're going to make you wear headgear and shin guards. And you can only take them off if you have more than 3 fights or if your opponent has more than 3 fights. So basically, you're going into your 4th fight. they'll give you the option to take it off. And some coaches, which, I have no problem with, especially guys like Josh Barnett and Chad George, and these are guys who've sent me fighters. And yes, I'm talking about Josh Barnett, former UFC heavyweight champion, and Chad George, combat jiu-jitsu world champion. They've sent me fighters, and they have a protocol where they just won't let their guys fight without shin guards. It's not worth it to them, for their guys to get hurt by taking a shin to the head in the amateurs. And, I can't really knock them for that. I can't really disagree with that. I mean, I don't think shin guards, because they kind of look like socks, so I don't think shin guards take away much from the experience. But headgear might. When people are seeing fighters going in there with headgear, they might be like, oh, this is kind of like when fans see that, they might be like, oh, this is kind of like a sparring session, This is not that exciting. But, we've had fights with headgear on where people have been knocked out. I mean, knocked out cold, We've had fights where shin guards were used and people were knocked out cold. I mean, actually, the two, it's crazy. The two best knockouts I think we've had as a promotion have been a shin to the head where there was a shin guard utilized, and a punch to the head where there was headgear utilized. So, I mean, maybe I'm coming in with some sort of bias, some sort of prejudice against just the aesthetics of head guards, right? I mean, it just looks stupid. But maybe it would help. Maybe it would help. I don't know. The sparring sessions that I've done where I've had headgear on, I hated it. I hated it, and I felt like I was in more pain because of the head guard. But who knows? I mean, if it's protecting your brain, or maybe if they could, excuse me, guys, if they can design one that'll work, that won't look bad, maybe something lighter. That just, I don't know. They gotta do something, because now we've got 3 fighters dead in a year, and we've got a guy in a coma, and we don't know what's going to happen to him. I hope he gets out of it okay. It would be extremely tragic if he didn't, and it's just a really sad situation. So, I mean, if you're in the chat right now, I'd appreciate if you guys subscribe. Feel free to also donate to the Super Chat or get your Fighters Rep gear in the links in the description. Also, we're an Amazon affiliate. If you click the Amazon affiliate link in the description, it'll take you to some hand wraps. But even if you don't buy those hand wraps, if you buy something else from Amazon after clicking that link, we'll get a commission. Any of these commissions will be funneled. The majority of the proceeds will be funneled right back into Fighters Rep promotions and helping me build what I hope is the next big thing in combat sports and in kickboxing. So, thank you guys for showing up. Also, please subscribe, like, comment, share, do everything the nice people on Facebook do. So let's see what else we got in here. David Arvello saying, the Ali Act is about the same type of limp-wristed legislation as the Brady Bill, made little to no positive impact on the intended target, and just creates another shit show in its wake. And that's from David Arvello. And I think if you look him up, he kind of knows what he's talking about. I'll sort of leave it at that. But that's something that we definitely should discuss at some point in one of these videos. Just do an entire video on the Ali Act and see what people think about it. I have experienced in my time that not all legislation works. This is what I've experienced as an attorney, at least. Definitely not all legislation works. So I'd be interested to dig into that a little deeper. Marco Martinez is saying Corrales versus Castillo is an example of a war that left both fighters less of themselves, but was one of the greatest fights ever. You can't get rid of wars. Fighters know what they are signing up for. Well, yeah, I mean, we don't want to get rid of war, Marco Martinez, but we do want to get rid of the chance that one of these guys get hurt to the point where they'll never be the same, or where they'll die or end up in a situation where they're dying. Again, I actually interviewed Magomed Abdusalamov at his last heavyweight bout before, unfortunately, he became, almost in a vegetative state. Now, luckily, he's recovered a little bit. But I interviewed Magomed Abdusalamov before that happened, just a couple weeks. It's very eerie. It's on the channel if you go back. And it's horrible, man. It's horrible what happened to him, And if there's anything that can be implemented to prevent that kind of damage from being done to the brain in a boxing match, I'm all for it. There's ways to do things without compromising the quality of the sport, and I'd be all for that. Too Lucky, thank you so much for joining the chat. Appreciate it much more. Too Lucky saying headgear gets you hit easier, just helps with cuts and bruising. I've heard things like that. I've also heard things like that about shin guards, that people just wear them so they don't get cuts. That could be the case. But I mean, if it's going to lighten the blunt, if it's going to lighten the blows to the head, then I'm all for it. Marco Martinez saying, one thing I've noticed is improper size headgear looks to really hurt fighters. I could believe that as well. Too Lucky is saying, I wear my headgear a little loose so it's not 100% connected to the head. Too Lucky, I'd like to know why you do that. That interests me very much. I'd like to know why. One time I wore one and it was a little tight and I definitely felt horrible afterwards. But I'd like to know why you think wearing it loose is a good idea. The R3N, thank you so much for joining the chat. He's saying, last but not least, Medfied. I don't know what that means, but thank you so much for joining the chat. I greatly appreciate it. But yeah, I don't know what Medfied means. So yeah, an unfortunate situation with Patrick Day being in a coma, being hospitalized. Do you guys think perhaps that the fight should have been stopped earlier? He was knocked down twice earlier on in the fight. He did seem to be doing some pretty good work in there, but knocked down a couple times earlier on in the fight. We've got ridiculous Twitter journalists calling him dead, even though we have no way to verify that. I don't know where they're getting their information from. I think just one makes something up and the others follow. It's really sad. And then another thing that's really crazy is Usyk. This whole situation with Usyk and Deontay Wilder, and people seemingly being in denial as to Usyk's ability to potentially beat Deontay Wilder. I mean, I don't understand how anybody can be a boxing fan and know anything about boxing, really, and say that Alexander Usyk has no chance to beat Deontay Wilder. I mean, I think that's crazy. I think if you're a boxing fan and you're objective at all, then you know that Alexander Usyk has a chance to beat anybody. I mean, A, it's boxing, but B, and this is a big B, is the guy is an Olympic gold medalist. He's a World Championships gold medalist. He's a European Championship gold medalist. He's got 350 amateur fights. He's undefeated as a pro. And he's just an absolute beast. And I don't see how people can say he's too small when he's 6'3" and he weighs more than Wilder. I mean, he actually weighed more than Wilder at the last fight. I think they said he weighed in at 215 pounds. Wilder, if I remember correctly, walked in against Tyson Fury at 209 pounds. So, as long as boxing is based on weight, then he's not too small. Andy Ruiz is not too small. Certainly not after knocking out Anthony Joshua the way he did. And, let these guys fight and stop trying to trash great fights before they happen. You guys are falling in. I mean, a lot of the guys that are saying this thing are falling into the boxing culture BS, boxing establishment BS, They're taking sides like a gang with these stupid promoters. Some people are PBC. Some people with De La Hoya. Actually at this point I don't know who's with De La Hoya, but some are with Bob Arum. I mean, it's whoever their fighter's with, they're clicking up with their fighter. Screw all that. Let's just have the best fight the best and see what happens. I mean, why would you try to stop an Alexander Usyk versus Deontay Wilder fight? Why would you try to stop any heavyweight fight like that from happening, but be completely quiet and be totally okay when Alexander Usyk fights Chaz Witherspoon, or when Dimitri Bivol fights a 22-1 underdog in Lenin Castillo? Come on, man. Come on, guys. What are we talking about here? David Arvello, what's your personal take on cornermen throwing in the towel? I think it's a great thing. Sometimes these guys, David, as you know, are too tough for their own good, man. Sometimes they're too tough for their own good, but they're just not good enough. So they end up getting hurt really bad, I don't know. I'm okay with a cornerman throwing in the towel. Who knows a fighter better than his cornerman? I don't think anybody does, really. They know their limitations as far as talent goes. They know their limitations as far as physical, mental. So I think it's a great thing for a cornerman to be able to throw in the towel. And I wish they would have done it in the Patrick Day fight, I don't think I won't fault them for not doing it, because I don't think anybody could have predicted that was going to happen. But it's a good option to have. The referee being able to stop the fight, the cornerman being able to stop the fight, and the fighter being able to stop his own fight. The more control we have in a situation like that, sometimes the better. But I don't think anyone else. And the doctor. I think that's great. Having those four entities with the ability to stop the fight, I think is fantastic. Too lucky. A tight headgear constricts the brain and doesn't allow oxygen to run through the head. Another reason when I get hit, the headgear moves and absorbs most of the impact instead of my head. Sort of like a slack concept. I like that. How do you see Garcia versus Dunno? Very interesting fight. I don't know how I see that. I think Garcia is a really good fighter. I think Garcia's being slept on a little bit. I know he might be a pretty boy and a bit of a hype job, and he's really he's really done his thing on social media to kind of build a sort of almost like a boy band type following thing. But I think he's fast. I think he can fight. He's definitely he's definitely getting good experience. He's going up against Dunno, who's got some good knockout power. Dunno's 21-1, 16 knockouts. I think it's a good fight. I think it's a really good fight. I think Ryan Garcia is showing some balls, stepping up and taking this fight, because he could be like a lot of the others and choose to just continue to pad his record with a bunch of nobodies. But he's deciding to do things a little differently, and I like it. He is, he's had 15 fights now? No, Garcia has 18 fights and 15 knockouts. So it is his time to step up now and show the world that he's a force to be reckoned with. And he's not going to do it if he's going to keep fighting, sausages all the time, So he's got to fight somebody. Dunno is a good test for him. I think Garcia pulls it off, man. I think Garcia's super fast. I think speed kills. I think he's got good skills. He's never lost. He's confident. So I like that fight for Garcia, What do you think? What I really find interesting about that situation, though, is the fact that De La Hoya and Golden Boy was not budging on him, on him fighting I think it was the last bout, where the bout kind of fell through because they gave him a last-minute opponent and he wanted more. He wanted more money, and they kind of aired Golden Boy's dirty laundry. I think that might come back to bite him in the ass. Um, or, maybe he's going to have to find a new promoter or something. I mean, I don't like a situation like that where a fighter is calling out a promoter and then the fighter basically is stepping up. When you're stepping up like that, you want all the support you can get, if you know what I mean. And to be on De La Hoya's bad side in this situation, that's just a really scary position to be in if you're Ryan Garcia, and he's undefeated. But he's the kind of kid that if he loses at this point, it's going to be devastating. Again, this is the boxing establishment, man. This is the bullshit boxing culture. If he loses at this point to Dunno, if he gets knocked out, or if he loses a decision, the Ryan Garcia hype train, the sponsorships, the everything related to Ryan Garcia gets knocked back. I mean, 75-80%. 75-80% easy. Right now he's a star on social media. But if this kid takes an L, man, it is going to be a huge problem. It's going to be a huge problem. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens now, especially that he's got De La Hoya on his shit side. We'll see what happens. I mean, they were hugging it out and shaking hands and acting like everything's okay, but he was airing De La Hoya out, man. He was airing Golden Boy out, and it was getting real ugly. I mean, this is something that should have been handled behind closed doors. So it was super ugly. Let's see what else we got here. Just wanted to mention rip to Eloy Perez, was an opponent of Broner on HBO early in Broner's career, appears to killed himself today in Tijuana. He was a huge underdog in that fight, lost badly, and never fought again. Oh my goodness. I didn't hear about that, Marco Martinez. But man, if that isn't the epitome of the shit boxing culture and establishment, where they put guys in there to lose and ruin their fucking lives, man. That is it right there, man. Holy shit. I think I remember Eloy Perez, man. If you can get me more detail on that, I'm going to look it up right now. But if you can get me more detail on that, I'd love to hear about it. Looks like Eloy Perez dead. One, look, check out the media. One says dead at 31. The other one says dead at 32. And he was an ex-world title challenger. Just a shame, man. Just an absolute shame. So I mean, that's the kind of thing that happens in boxing all the time, man. They put somebody in there who doesn't belong yet. They're giving them a fight that they have absolutely no chance of winning. They lose the fight. They've dedicated their whole life to this sport. Now what do? What do they do? And they've taken that loss. Now no promoter wants to work with them. Now the only fights they can get are, basically where they're an opponent. I mean, it's tough, and there are I must say there are tomato cans that want to be tomato cans. They just want to get in there, make a quick buck. Whatever happens, happens. That's fine. But the majority of fighters, they want to be in an even fight, and that's something I think is important. I think the MMA does a much better job of that. At least the UFC does. And that's something I aim for in all my Fighters Rep fights. I try to make it as evenly matched a fight as possible because I feel like that always brings out the best in these fighters. And you're going to get a competitive fight. And that's what the fans came to see. They didn't come to see a guy get, completely outclassed in every fight. Sometimes you do want a war. You want some action. You want an evenly matched technical fight. You want if a guy's going to get the knockout, you want him to go through something and earn it. The most exciting fight, for example, was in a long time in the heavyweight division was when Anthony Joshua fought Vladimir Klitschko. Man, that was so exciting. It was so exciting because Joshua had to pick himself off the canvas after getting blasted and get up and knock Klitschko out. That's what people want to see. They'd much rather see that, I think, than just a fight where a guy has no business in there, no skill, just get absolutely crushed. And it's not memorable. It's not memorable. But a fight like Joshua and Klitschko, that's a memorable fight, and that's something that people are going to remember. And when you put on the next fight, they're going to say, man, I want to go to that. Because that shit was fire. I want to go to that, you know? Here we go. So, Too Lucky is saying Patrick Day fought two real KO artists back to back under 6 months. Shouldn't have taken that fight. Man, it's a real shame. It's a real shame, you know. In hindsight, you know, lucky in hindsight, Too Lucky. It's 2020, man. Super clear. Unlike this camera right now, no, we're good. But you know, who could have predicted something like that, man? That's horrible that something like that can happen. David Arvello saying, I agree. I think there's a difference between a guy taking a beating and being in tough spots versus having nothing left to give in return in the fight other than being target if the latter stop it. Marco Martinez, I found new respect for Garcia for standing up to De La Hoya. Right. I mean, we found respect for him, but is De La Hoya going to find respect for him to that? That's a scary situation, my man, to piss off the guy that's basically paying for everything. Too Lucky, I don't see Garcia stopping Dunno. Dunno's real tough and has good stamina. Garcia has to beat him on points and walk circles around Dunno. Dunno already took out one of Golden Boy's top 135 prospects, Chima. Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, look, Ryan Garcia's got some real speed on those punches. You know, you never know. I think if anybody doesn't see one of those punches coming, they could get knocked down. You know, not to say that Dunno isn't tough. You're right. He's a tough guy. And he's got knockout power. You know, he hits hard. But Ryan Garcia, man, he's fast. And he's got some of the fastest hands I've seen in boxing. And if he lands a shot on you when you're not looking, that shot could put you to sleep. He's hurt several people, so we'll see. Marco Martinez, you might have heard that wrong. Golden Boy knew Garcia's opponent had an active warrant. He was arrested on the day of the weigh-in. Ryan wanted more money. Right. He wanted more money for the short notice replacement. Yeah, that's what I said, because they were going to fight someone. They were going to get him someone else to fight. But, I mean, why? You know, first off, I'm not sure why he'd ask for more money for a short notice opponent, unless it was a tougher short notice opponent. But second off, that entire situation should have been handled behind closed doors. There's no reason I should know about that. There's no reason the boxing public should have known about that. There's no reason everybody in the boxing community should have known about that. That was just really embarrassing, and I don't think that that's something that Ryan Garcia and his team handled that well. That should have been squashed behind closed doors. King Dale Clark, thank you so much for joining the chat, brother. He wrote, think she's going to ask me to send money? What should I do? I can't get this girl out of my head. King Dale Clark. Well, I don't know what you're talking about, King Dale, but, you know, I definitely don't think you should send her the money. At least not until you guys are in a committed relationship and you know that she's not just using you for the money. You're welcome. Marco Martinez, Canelo seemed to take Garcia's side, and within a couple days, Golden Boy signed Ryan to a mega extension and put him on the Canelo undercard. I did see that. You know, I think Canelo's also having some issues with Golden Boy, if I'm being honest with you. I mean, I don't think, to be quite frank, that if you're airing the sort of laundry that we've seen on Golden Boy recently, and De La Hoya's situation, you know, there might be something going on there that is causing these fighters to maybe reconsider. So, yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. David Arvello saying, you only have a case to ask for more money on a short notice replacement opponent if that opponent is tougher, ranked higher than the original. I agree with David Arvello. Otherwise, as in Garcia's case, you're just playing yourself. I agree 100% with Dave Arvello, because if it's a short notice bum, you know, then you got lucky. And and it's probably going to be a bum because they're fighting him at the last minute. I mean, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be somebody that's as good as the original opponent. 9 times out of 10. Because 9 times out of 10, if it was, they would have made that fight. So, you know, I don't know, man. I agree with David Arvello in this situation. I don't think Ryan Garcia should have asked for more money. He had no business asking for more money. But we'll see what happens, man. We'll see what happens. You know, at the end of the day, Golden Boy Promotions is paying those referees, is paying those judges, is paying that sanctioning body to sanction that fight. Is that the person you want to piss off? Your promoter? I mean, look, I promote fights, and I pay everybody. I mean, it's the way it is. The promoter is the one that has to pay the referees and the judges and the timekeeper and all of that stuff, you know. And if somebody wanted to be on my good side and was, you know, shitting all over me on social media, it wouldn't work out. You wouldn't be on my good side. Now, would I try to do something with the commission? No, but I'm not a boxing promoter. Boxing has historically been corrupted, and not everybody is going to be able to kind of disconnect themselves from the business at hand. You know, some people are going to take things personally and try to screw you over, and that's just the way it is. You know, especially in boxing, man. We've seen some shady decisions, and I think you guys understand why. Kingsdale Clark, I'm talking about a Ukrainian woman online, dude. I'm 26 from UK. I like her. She does me. But yesterday she told me they might cut her internet, so I'm worried in case she asks for that money. I'm saving up now to go to the Ukraine and visit her, man. Love this woman, but I'm a boxing fan too. Sorry if that was like random. Again, boxing, love the support, but this guy driving me mad. So you love a Ukrainian woman. Have you met her? Are you in a relationship with her yet? Or is she just online? That's all I'm going to leave it at. Savage Facts is saying just like Usyk opponent. Savage, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Please let me know who you're talking about when you say just like Usyk opponent. You got to give me context, Savage. I'm not a mind reader over here, brother. David Arvello saying stupid and harebrained tactic on the part of Garcia and his team. Doubly so for publicly airing out negotiations. People have long memories. That kind of dumb stuff will come back on you. 100,000%. That's why, David Arvello, you are my boy. You understand the way reality works. I don't know where this 19-year-old or whatever he is, 12-year-old Ryan Garcia got off, thinking that he can just do his own promoter like that in public. I mean, come on, man. Like, I don't even want to go there, man. I just feel like whoever was advising him really dropped the fucking ball on that one. That was really stupid. Savage Facts, they all corrupt. A lot of them are, brother. A lot of them are. Try to keep the faith. There are some people that actually care about fighters. I'll tell you that for sure. So keep the faith. But yes, a lot of corruption. A lot. King Dale Clark, what do you think of the online relationship in general? Dude, my friends have told me it's for people with no confidence. LOL. And don't get me wrong, yeah. I think that's true, but for me, it's not. King, I really appreciate what you're saying here, but this is not like an online dating forum. That being said, if you're worried about this person, whether she likes you or not, or whatever it is, then it's probably not a good thing. Let me tell you that. All right. Too Lucky, where are your fights based out of? Amateur or professional with headgear? Too Lucky, I'm in Southern California, Los Angeles, basically. The fights happen in Seal Beach, which is in Orange County. I'm also looking at a venue in Long Beach. We do amateur fights, but we're doing our first Pro-Am coming up next. It's only headgear. up until the third fight, and that's not because of me. That's because the athletic commission, they forced that. And after the third fight, then you can take off the headgear. As far as as far as amateur and professional as well, we do kickboxing, unified rules kickboxing. We're the only kickboxing promotion in the whole state of California that does exclusively kickboxing. And now that we got the pro license, we're definitely the only pro kickboxing promotion that we know of in the state of California. So something we're really proud of. We actually just uploaded 3 of our fights to the YouTube channel today from the last event. You can watch them for free. We air our fights live on YouTube for free, and then we upload them individually onto YouTube for free as well, so guys can find their fights. And please subscribe. If you donate or buy any of the Fighters Rep merch, this Fighters Rep t-shirt is pretty dope, I think. If you purchase anything in the links below, we get credit for it. Excuse me, and it gets reinvested right back into the promotion, where I'm trying to build, the best young strikers in the world. And we've got the best camps in the world here, I deal with Black House and Saxon and CMMA and schools like that have some of the best fighters in the world. So definitely something that I think you'd really enjoy. All the fights are really exciting. Too Lucky is saying... All right, so Savage is saying amateurs with headgear and pros with no headgear. Actually, amateur after the third fight, like I said, they take the headgear and shins off, but that's optional. If the fighters still want to wear it, they can. Too Lucky is saying you're probably getting catfished by some dudes trying to get you to send money to them. Ha, ha, ha. Kingsdale Clark, no, we have never met. Been chatting to her for 4 weeks, but see her on Skype regularly. Her name is Tatiana. What's your opinion on Ukrainian women? Many people say they're after money. King Dale, I'd rather not make a comment on that, brother. Again, I'm not sure this is the channel to discuss that kind of thing, but I do think that you definitely want to be in a relationship with somebody before you send them any kind of money. Be in the relationship, okay? Don't send them money unless you're in a relationship with them. Savage Facts, last minute noticed to fight, bro. Oh, yeah. That's true, Savage. Yeah, Witherspoon was a last-minute notice. But, I mean, even the guy who was supposed to fight, Tyrone Spong, was he, supposed to give Usyk any sort of test? I don't know about that. I don't think a kickboxer with, some boxing fights was going to give the greatest cruiserweight of all time, or one of the greatest cruiserweights of all time, any sort of trouble where that same cruiserweight has had 350 amateur bouts and won 3 gold medals. But, call me crazy. The boxing establishment knows what it's doing. I must be the crazy one. They're the normal ones. I know that Savage Facts, LOL, I got 6 amateur fights. Okay. Kingdale Clark only, but I know she's genuine, dude. Anyway, you had any experience with Ukrainian women? I haven't, man. I haven't had any experience with Ukrainian women. Savage Facts, only 6, not bad. I have 25 in the U.S. and 43 in PR. Oh, Savage Facts. Are you Puerto Rican, brother? 43 fights in Puerto Rico? It's very interesting. Too Lucky. Only been boxing for 3 years, played 2 years of college basketball. I see. I played high school basketball, if you guys care. But yeah, 2 years of college basketball is pretty impressive. Basketball is tough, man. That's a tough sport to make it in. Savage Facts. How old are you? Too Lucky. I'd be really interested. I could send some fights to you. If you're saying you want to send me fighters, I'd love to have them. Kingdale Clark. I'm teasing her going for that beast Better Biev. Guys, did you see that Better Biev is scheduled to fight Gvadzik? Teddy Atlas's Ukrainian guy that Teddy Atlas is training? Oh, man. That's going to be a boxing fight to watch. Better Biev versus Gvadzik. That's the fight you guys tune in and watch. Marco Martinez, I disagree with you, David. His promoter released the statement saying Garcia felt Dono was too tough. That's when Garcia really started going at it with De La Hoya. Maybe. But at the end of the day, Marco, that's something you handle. Dude, that's something you handle like backstage, man. You don't put that on YouTube, man. I don't think that's a smart idea. David Arvelo, I once had a dude tell me he wanted 2 times his money because his opponent missed weight by less than a pound. I cut a promo and told him that's not how things work, and him and his team of sausages came around. Savage facts, you're still young, keep fighting in tournaments, that's where you get experience. King Dale Clark, I appreciate it, dude. Yeah, me and Tatiana need to meet in person before she gets any money from me, but man, I know she for real. I have a good feeling about this woman. Anyway, thoughts on Better BF? Dude, Better BF is a killer, one of the scariest punchers in boxing, one of the scariest boxers, period. And, definitely somebody to watch, but I don't know. I don't know if he could beat Gvadzik. That's going to be an interesting fight. That's actually two of the best guys fighting each other, low key, because they're not that really that popular, but definitely something that people should be tuning in to watch. Savage facts. They must have changed the rules with headgear. I'm 33 years old. When you're 16, you fight open. I never fought without headgears in my amateur days. I fought in golden gloves and Spanish gloves as well, Pana. Oh, very cool, Pana. Well, here I'm talking about the IKF, which is the International Kickboxing Federation. So I don't promote boxing. I promote kickboxing. And the way the IKF works, and they're the only sanctioning body that's allowed to sanction amateur kickboxing in the state of California and in many other states. And the way they work is, after your third fight, you can opt to take off the headgear and the shin guards. Otherwise, you got to wear them. If let's say you're going into your fourth fight, you can say, "Oh, I don't want to wear headgear and shin guards." But if your opponent doesn't have 4 fights or is not going into their fourth fight, then you still got to wear them. If you both have 4 fights or more, then you guys can choose, if you want to wear them or not. King Dale Clark is saying, I'm voting for Better BF just because my babe is from Ukraine. I'm just teasing her. It's so fun, man, teasing her on Skype. We have a good laugh. When I'm with her, she wants to watch boxing with me. When you're with her, are you with her on Skype? Because, you haven't met her, right? Too lucky. Garcia is ran by his parents pretty much. That could be a gift and a curse to be run by your parents. I'll leave it at that. Sometimes it's good to be guided by your parents, but sometimes it's detrimental because they don't know what they're doing, especially in this situation. They didn't know what they were doing. King Dale Clark, what's your thoughts on the late, great Edwin Valero? He was my favorite boxer. Edwin Valero was a beast. Big shout out to Venezuela, his homeland, which is going through a lot right now. But Edwin Valero was a beast, man. And it's a shame he died so young. Real shame. Marco Martinez, Valero was a beast. Crazy MFer, but in the ring, he was sick. Knuckleheads, please subscribe to the channel if you like what we're doing here. We're going to be doing this basically Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday immediately after the big fights. Typically, we'll be on at 9 p.m. Pacific. So be sure to tune in then. Subscribe, like, share. Get your Fighters Rep merchandise. Donate below. Donate to the Super Chat. It's much appreciated. I'm about to sign out right now. I'm just going to read a couple more of your comments here. And I appreciate you guys tuning in. King Dale Clark, when I'm with her in person, man, got to be realistic. Yeah, when I'm with her in Ukraine, we'll smash that TV on and get the snuggles in. Nice, warm, relaxing boxing by the fire. King Dale, man, you are a character, my man. Savage Facts, do you have any thought of Ruiz's weight? There's videos of him looking slim. I did see that there's some videos of him looking slim. I think what he should do is put on muscle and keep working, stay flexible, put on a little muscle and maybe lose a little fat, or just keep training his craft, man. I think that's really important. Just keep boxing, keep sparring, keep training. He's going to have to be on point to beat Joshua again. I actually think Joshua's going to beat him the second time around, to be honest with you. I think Joshua rushed in when he had him hurt and made a mistake against a shorter guy with very fast hands. He shouldn't have done that. I think if Joshua were to relive that experience, he would stay long, he would stay on the outside, and he'd basically knock Ruiz out or try to knock him out. David Arvello, curse 99% of the time. It's an unholy curse. Not sure what you're talking about there, David. Too Lucky. Glad I found this channel. Gotta leave. Have a good night, everybody. Have a great night. Too Lucky again. Be sure to tune in, you guys. 9 p.m. Pacific. Probably gonna do this Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Basically every day except Tuesday and Sunday. So definitely tune in and be part of it. 9 p.m. Pacific. King Dale Clark, what's it like in Venezuela? Have you been there? I'm interested in that country, dude. I have been there. I've been there a couple times. It was a very nice country, but right now they're dealing with a lot of economic hardship. So that's where that's at. Knuckleheads, I'm going to have to cut out on you here. I really appreciate you guys joining the chat. Again, be sure to subscribe, leave comments if you weren't able to make the chat. And we'll see you guys very soon. Have a good one.